Hi, everyone. It's great to be with you today to present on a topic that I think is extremely important now more than ever. I'm Jessica Mirowitz. I work in marketing at Nestle Purina here in St. Louis, and I have a degree in journalism from the University of Missouri. And I also have a master's in media and communications from Webster University. And this is the third class that I've done for the Mirowitz Center Tech Tutor program this year. The first was about Facebook and how to adjust your privacy settings to make sure your usage of the social networking platform is safer and therefore more enjoyable. The second topic I did was tips for using Google search and how to find what you're looking for, keeping in mind there's a lot of different types of content out there you might come across. Both of these classes can be found on the Mirowitz Center YouTube page in case you missed them. But in doing those two classes, it really led me into wanting to dive into the topic of misinformation and how all of us can play an important role in stopping the spread by being more informed consumers of news and media. I'd like to kick things off with a fun personal anecdote. Picture me, a 22-year-old recent college grad in 2008, fresh out of Mizzou, walking the streets of New York City, excited to start my internship at AOL. I get off the subway in the East Village. I take the elevator up to this expansive, modern, open office. You can actually see a photo of it here, which I found online. This is the actual office where I worked. How lucky was I? Fun fact, actually, most of these floors in this building today have been taken over by the Facebook offices. Who would have thought? So my job for 10 bucks an hour was to select images from the Getty and AP newswires to go along with feature stories on AOL News. The newswires would have dozens of different images from a single press conference or a political event, and I had to choose one, crop it, and submit it to my editor for final approval to get published on the site. So you can see in this example here, this is a screenshot of the AOL homepage from 2009, a story about President Obama struggling with poll results. This is the type of story that I would have pulled an image for. As a photo editor, I could choose an image of him looking concerned or frustrated or even defiant and triumphant. A facial expression in a photo can say a lot. And that's a lot of responsibility to put on a 22-year-old new college grad. And this is happening in newsrooms all over the world. Real humans like you and me who have varying levels of qualifications and years of experience are making these types of decisions every day. So what I think is important to take away here, and what I want to kick things off with, is to explain to you that one of the first things they teach us in journalism school is that any piece of media you consume is never going to be an entirely unbiased and accurate reflection of the real world. That's because human beings like us are behind it. We're doing the best we can to select the most important topics to cover, providing as many facts and as much context as we're able to gather, and then selecting images to help illustrate what's happening. But some form of bias will always exist, and that's okay. We just have to keep this in the back of our minds to be more responsible consumers of news. So there's a difference between media bias and misinformation. Misinformation is not a new phenomenon. It's been around for ages. It's just so much more prevalent today because of how easily it can spread in our digital media environment. Misinformation can occur in different forms. Some are more nefarious than others. The first bucket I have here at the top is where information can be presented in a way that's not meant to be taken seriously or as fact. It could be a comedian on Saturday Night Live making a joke about a headline, or a pundit on Twitter sharing their opinion on an issue, trying to spark controversy to gain a following or to build notoriety. In these cases, it's clear who's behind it and what their intentions are. The problem is when bits and pieces of what they say spread across the internet and we lose the original context. The second bucket of misinformation is a lot more serious and scary because the intentions behind it are meant to cause harm by confusing, angering, or sowing doubt. This can come in the form of imposter content, someone pretending to be someone they're not, or fabricated and manipulated content that's completely made up. And this bucket is often referred to as disinformation, where again, it's not clear who's behind it, but there most certainly are bad actors with bad intentions. Also, this can be directed at both sides of the political spectrum, both the right and the left. It's not all happening on one side. So for today, we'll be covering why misinformation spreads so easily in today's digital media environment. I'll go through different content types and purposes, and we'll have a fun little quiz to get you guys engaged. We'll go through some tips to spot misinformation online, and then I'll share a couple things that we can all do to help. Okay, so Facebook is the most, hopefully, okay, you guys are seeing this. Facebook is the most widely used social media platform today, with almost 70% of all US adults using it. Our average time spent with media is at an all-time high, and the pandemic has only increased this. Most people use Facebook to stay connected to their friends and loved ones, to see photos, to engage in groups, to look at what's going on in their community. But it's also a source of news and information because anyone can share a link to an article that's published outside of Facebook. 1/3 of US adults say they regularly get their news from Facebook, and here's why that's problematic. There's a lot of emotion tied to Facebook. It was originally founded with the intention of connecting people, but today, Facebook's accountable to show their shareholders that that they're growing. Facebook wants to keep us engaged, logging in multiple times a day to check our news feeds and to see what's going on with our loved ones, because it's our time and our attention that they're able to sell to their advertisers. So in order to keep us logging in and engaging, Facebook's technology learns what we engage with and is more likely to show us things in our newsfeed that they think we'll like. Content that gets the most reactions, you can see the little likes, loves, haha, wow, sad, angry. So the content that gets the most amount of these little reactions ends up getting more prominence and is more likely to be seen. And unfortunately, content that generates the most reactions tends to be the most divisive. According to the Wall Street Journal's recent The Facebook Files report, a whistleblower who left the company last year confirmed that Facebook knew that divisive content was what was keeping its users engaged and that they didn't do anything about it. And the side effect of this has been an angrier, more divided population, not just in the US, but across the world. So why haven't they stopped it? The founders of Facebook and other social sites like Twitter, etc., they did not intentionally create these platforms to spread misinformation and to cause harm to society. They really wanted to make our lives better by giving us a new way to connect. So to keep things simple, here are the 3 main reasons why it's so difficult for them to manage this. First, it's extremely difficult to monitor. There's vast quantities of content shared on social media every day, every second, and it can't possibly all be fact-checked or verified for accuracy. And once it takes off, it's hard to stop. Plus, we all have freedom of speech to say whatever we want to say, as long as it doesn't violate Facebook's policies around really serious things like violence or pornography. Platforms like Facebook and Twitter have cracked down, and they have taken steps to ban accounts that are well known for spreading misinformation. And people like us, we actually have the ability to report something to Facebook that seems dangerous. And they do have teams that moderate content. And so when content gets reported, and if the moderation team deems it to be really bad, they will take it down. But they cannot possibly comb through everything. So the problem's just so much bigger than they're able to handle. Second, social platforms like Facebook profit from our attention. And as I explained on the last slide, they've learned what grabs our attention more than anything are things that alarm us or anger us. And then last, big tech companies like Facebook and Google are not held accountable for misinformation that spreads on their platforms. There are old, outdated laws in place that protect internet companies, and they classify them differently than traditional news organizations, so they can't be sued for having inaccurate information on their platform. The explosion of online publishing technology makes it easy for anyone to create content, publish it on a site that looks like news, and share it on social media. These are some examples of known fake news websites that create layouts that look real. They have names like Tribune, Gazette, Reporter, Journal. They mimic real news sites and they seem real. But if you dig into the site itself, and if you even look at their About Us section, if they even have one, they'll call themselves satire, or they'll say they're not meant to be taken seriously. But this doesn't come through in the articles themselves or when they get shared on social media. Here are some examples of similar websites and how it looks when it gets shared on social media. Both come from websites that have the word Tribune in them to trick us into thinking it's legitimate. But both of these are sharing false propaganda with bad intentions. And you can see these were shared by users on Facebook thousands and thousands of times. If you look at the engagement underneath them and see all the numbers of comments and the numbers of shares, thousands of times. A quick Google search of the name of these news sites will quickly tell you whether it can be trusted, but it's hard. Even smart, educated, savvy folks like you and me who have been consuming news our entire lives can have a hard time telling the difference between a fact-checked news piece to an opinion piece or a blog. And it's not our fault. We can be easily fooled. That's bad in and of itself, but it becomes a problem the moment we share a piece of content that's not real. The second this happens, this misinformation starts to spread and then it gets out of control. You might also be surprised to hear that younger generations, despite being digital natives, are just as vulnerable as older generations. A 2019 Stanford University study on a group of high school students found that they had trouble identifying different types of information online. Things like understanding that a climate change website that had ties to the fossil fuel industry were problematic. Not being able to identify a form of advertising on a news site. And half of the students were quick to believe that a grainy video of ballot stuffing was strong evidence of voter fraud when the video was actually shot in Russia. Luckily, media literacy is now a subject that's being taught a lot in classrooms today, which is great. It's all about helping us look at things with a more critical eye. There are a lot of great educational resources out there today for educators and students when it comes to media literacy, and I came across this really great framework that I wanted to share with you. So as consumers of media, it's important to be able to distinguish between the different types of content you might come across and to be aware of what its primary purpose is. So I'll go through each of the buckets. The first one is entertainment. So this is, what we spend probably most of our time with: TV shows, movies, video games, sports, music, comedy. Its primary purpose is to entertain us, but it can have other purposes too, such as to further an opinion or a way of thinking. But entertainment elicits an emotional response. It's meant to help us relax, unwind, escape reality. The next bucket is opinion. This comes in the form of editorial columns, commentary on radio, cable TV, blogs, and tweets. Its primary purpose is to persuade you with a reasoned argument. And this type of content is biased, and that's okay. We may seek out information like this because we value people's opinions and we want to know what they think about a certain topic or issue. The next bucket is advertising. So this comes in the form of TV commercials, print ads, digital social media ads. A lot of advertising today is done by influencers and promoted content. So it kind of blends in with what you see people posting on social media, and it's kind of hard to tell the difference. But its primary purpose is to sell you a product or a service. The next bucket is news. So verified, fact-based reporting from well-established news sources. And its primary purpose is to inform and provide context as neutrally as possible. The next bucket is raw information. So these are just photos by themselves or a single video with no context, with no information around where it was shot, who shot it, etc. So just a raw file, essentially. This could come in the form of court documents or surveillance video or 911 call transcripts. So it's, again, pieces of raw media with no context. And its primary purpose is to complement a story, but it doesn't tell the whole story on its own. And then last, there's propaganda. This comes in many different formats that are hard to distinguish between other ones, like actual news. And its primary purpose is to provoke, and it can be dangerous if it influences actions. So we are entering the interactive portion of today, and I would love to bring you guys in. I'm going to share some examples, and if you don't mind going into your comments and taking a guess, what bucket do you think this piece of content is? So let's go with example 1. I'll give everyone a minute or two for each example. Which bucket do you think this is?
So you can type a comment in the chat.
Mm-hmm. We'll give everyone a couple more seconds.
Okay, coming through is advertising. Couple people, 3, 4 people say
That
advertising.
is correct. Good job, guys. This is advertising. This is actually pretty clear that it's an ad. You can see the advertiser in the bottom right corner. This is an ad. Good job. All right, next. I have 2 examples to show you. What do you guys think this is? Okay. Give you a couple more seconds. This one's a little bit trickier, but this is also advertising. This is what a lot of ads actually look like today on social media sites. You can tell it's advertising because these are influencers. They're showing, just cool, cute images of them doing things like getting pizza, or this pug, actually, believe it or not, this pug makes its owners millions of dollars a year in advertising because he is a dog influencer and he has millions and millions of followers. And yeah, his owners are making a lot of money doing partnering with brands and doing promoted posts. So all they have to do is take a photo of him with this product. They post it on Instagram. And at the very, very end, you can see a little hashtag ad, AD, at the very end of the caption. That's how you know it's an ad. Very, so it's definitely not as overt, but these are ads. Their primary purpose is to sell. Okay. What is this? Okay, I will tell you, it is raw information. So this is just raw data pulled from the CDC website. Anyone can kind of go in, grab this, and use it in an article where you might provide more context around the data itself. But all by itself, it's raw info with no context. How about this one? Hopefully this got a chuckle from a few of you. It looks like news, as you can see, but it's actually entertainment. So it comes from a popular satire website called The Onion, and they just have fun with news headlines, and they don't pretend to, that it's real. But, every now and then, I think context. Not this one. This one's kind of ridiculous, but that can easily happen. All right, next. What would this fall into? Okay, if you guessed news, you are correct. This is from the New York Times, which is a reputable news organization. And this is an article on their website about climate change. And I know you can't see the whole contents of the article, but this falls under news. Okay, how about this? I'm not going to show you the video itself. I'm not sure if any of you have seen this, but it is a show called Last Week Tonight with John Oliver, and it's on HBO. And it's kind of a news-ish. Okay, so this is kind of a tricky one because it's primarily entertainment. There's also some form of news and opinion inserted in videos like these, where commentators have fun with news headlines or insert jokes. But some might also argue it could be propaganda, but it's not propaganda because we know exactly who produced it, who it's coming from, whether we agree with their point of view or not. So this is entertainment. Okay, what about this one? If you guessed opinion, you were correct. And the reason you can tell it's opinion is because the account, the news organization it comes from is Bloomberg, but they clearly state that it's Bloomberg opinion. You can see it in the handle where it was posted from. They also have it in the bottom right corner of the image itself. It says Bloomberg opinion. So I appreciate that they're being upfront as a news consumer that this is truly opinion. And that's fine. It's, good to seek out opinions from news sources we trust. How about this one? This one is also opinion. You can see at the very top, it's small, it's tiny, and little, small letters, highlighted yellow, it says opinion. These are, personal anecdotes. It's coming from a single person. They're sharing their thoughts, their story, but its opinion doesn't necessarily go through all of the rigorous, fact checking that news goes through, but it can look a lot like news when it's posted online. How about this one? So this is a tweet, and you can see there's a little blue check mark at the end of his name. You'll see that a lot on Twitter, Facebook, and other places. That shows that it's Twitter has verified that it is a real person and not a bot or a machine posting fake content, which does happen. So that's what that blue check mark means. So that's one step to understanding whether something has been fabricated or not. But this tweet is an opinion, and pretty much all tweets are opinions. They're coming from a single person. We may really trust that person and value their opinion, and that's why we choose to follow them and seek out what they have to say. And they may be saying something that's very factual and right, but it's a tweet, something coming from a single person is an opinion. And we just have to keep that in mind. Okay, how about this? These are both in the same category. Okay, if you guessed propaganda, you were correct. Good job. So the one on the left is what is called a meme, where someone will take an image and then add text to it. A lot of times with memes, we have no clue where it came from, who made it, whether it's really what was said, whether it was taken out of context. And memes are always put out there to elicit an emotion or in other people, maybe to anger someone or to cause harm. So again, because we have no clue who made this, where it came from, it's propaganda. And then on the right, this is a Facebook post where someone was sharing an image of a tweet. The tweet was actually not made by the former president. It was digitally manipulated. So this is not real. Again, when someone shares an image of something, it can just spread and spread, and it can be really dangerous. So we have no idea, who manipulated this image of this tweet, but once it gets out there and starts being shared, it can again further divisions and anger people. Okay, good job, you guys. We made it through the quiz. So the key takeaway here is that every piece of media we come across has a primary purpose. And sometimes it's hard to tell as the different content types can blend together. And sometimes things can have multiple purposes, but knowing what its primary purpose is, whether it's to profit, to inform, to persuade, or to divide, is going to help us be more conscious consumers of media, and will help us think twice before we react to something we come across online. So anytime you're consuming media, these are just kind of 3 things to keep in the back of your mind. Who created this? Is it clear? What is its primary purpose? And how does it make me feel? Okay, next, I have 5 tips to help you be just a bit more critical of the information you're taking in. If you come across a piece of content online, here's a checklist to help you determine if it can be trusted. First, look at who wrote it. Is there a byline at all? What are the reporter's credentials? What kind of stories have they written in the past? Where have they worked in the past? Most news reporters, you can look them up online and find a ton of information about them because they are out there. When was it published? Is it a month old or even a few years old? An outdated article or a photo or video taken out of context can be a huge source of misinformation. Third, Have you heard of the site that this content came from? Is it a place where you've gotten your news from before? You can also see if the site has an About Us section with more info on the organization behind it. Fourth, if you read a story and it just sounds totally unbelievable and it's making you feel a certain way, do a quick Google search to see if anyone else is reporting on it. If no other legitimate news sites are reporting it, that's a red flag. And then last, look at who's quoted in the article. What are their credentials? Can the quote be found elsewhere? Also, what data points or studies are referenced? If it's someone just rambling on with no statistical data to back up what they're saying, it should be pretty clear this is not fact checked and is purely someone's opinion or a blog. Printed messages and photos, such as those that appear in posters or protest signs or t-shirts, are easy to manipulate using widely available and easy to use editing software. Photos are often used out of context too, such as an image of a protester at a completely different event than the one that's being talked about in the story. Or an image can be cropped to make something look different than it really was, like the size of a crowd at an event. In this example on the right, a photo editor at Fox News stitched two images together to make the photo look a lot more intense than it really was, but this is not what was originally captured in the moment. It was later taken down after this discovery was made. In other cases, a photo can be digitally manipulated to depict a false reality. And then once it starts spreading on social media, it's difficult to tell where it came from and whether it's real. One thing you can always do if you're not sure whether an image is real is to do a Google search of the specific photo in question. So in this example, I would Google Hurricane Harvey Shark Highway, as you can see here, and I'd quickly start to see that many legitimate news sources are saying, this is not real, this has been faked, because people are spotting this stuff all the time and reporting it. So to close things out, I'm going to leave you with 3 tips on things we can and should all be doing to stop the spread of misinformation. First, which I'm sure most of you already do, make sure you get your news from a variety of well-established news sources. This, of course, sometimes costs money and subscription fees, but you'll see a lot fewer pop-up ads, and you really do get what you pay for. Use social media and other opinion sources that lean toward a certain political direction to supplement your main news sources, but they shouldn't be your primary news source. I'm actually going to send you all out a really interesting chart called the media bias chart that shows the reliability and the bias of a whole bunch of different news sources. You can see where different websites and news publications fall on the spectrum, and you can kind of seek out sources from there. I'll send that to you all after class. Second, think twice before you engage with any piece of content online, whether it's as simple as a like or a comment or a share. This applies to email forwards that you might get too. Take the steps I shared before to think critically about where it came from and what its purpose is before you share it out. And then last, it's good to be informed, but also try limiting the amount of media you're consuming each day, which I know can be hard. Spend more time talking about news, politics, issues in person or over the phone if you can, rather than online where things can get really heated. And that is it for today. This is the chart that I mentioned before, the media bias chart that I will send out to you all. So I am done presenting. I'm happy to answer any questions that anyone might have or hear any thoughts. I hope everyone hopefully got something out of this and learned a couple things along the way.
If you would like, you can unmute and ask your question, or you can type a question in the chat. Either way. Hi, Maxine. Do you want to unmute yourself?
Yes, thank you, Jess. That was amazing, as
Thank
always.
you.
I have a suggestion, and it kind of feeds on your last slide. It said to limit the use. So there's a great book I just read,
Hmm.
and it's called How to Break Up with Your Phone. And it gave me concrete suggestions how to minimize my time on screens. And lo and behold, I just tried it for the first week, and I kind of half-heartedly, but a media fast on Shabbos, those kind of little easy things to do. And my time on my screen was down 25% without even trying. So I just took off all of my apps that were like stimulating me to open, and I turned off my notifications, and it really works. And I don't watch TV, or I don't read news. I'm one of those uninformed. So I go to my dear daughter-in-law, who is informed of all things digital. And if I'm ever at a loss for what something means or how to interpret it, I go to her. So I think it helps to have a really well-informed provider that sets you straight, because it's easy to get confused. So thank you.
Thank you. No, that's a great suggestion. I try to do the same thing too, and it's hard. It's really hard. These things become habits, and it's really hard to break habits. But if you can do it just a little bit, each day or each week, I do think that it helps. Our devices are really addicting, and we get so much of our news now on our devices, and so that's part of the problem that I talked about earlier. And I think it's something we all just have to be. The first step is to be aware of it, and I think that can really help.
Dolores, did you have something you wanted to say?
No.
No. Okay.
Thanks for joining. Well, I will send out some of these materials to you all. Feel free to reach out to me if you have any questions. I'm here to help. I hope you all found this helpful, learned a couple things along the way.
So Jessica, are you going to send that to me and I'm going to send it on? Is
Yes,
that
I'll
you
send
would
it
like
to
to
you.
do? Okay, so
Yep.
be on the lookout, excuse me, for an email from me and with Jessica's information.
Hey, Jessica, this is Jen. Thank you so much.
Hi,
Your
Jen. Thank
presentations are
you.
amazing. So I just had a question, because you had started the presentation in such a cool way about your first job and working at AOL, and you were this intern, and I love that. And I was just going to ask you, are interns coming in these days, are they having new challenges and trainings, and how are the companies addressing these new people that are coming in that are really being challenged? I'm sure when you did it, it was challenging, but now it's probably even more challenging.
Yeah, and I think everyone assumes that, oh, you're young, you know how this all works, you can help us. But I think what they're seeing and some of the studies that I've seen, like the Stanford one I mentioned, is that actually young people aren't. This stuff is hard. This is not just challenging for a certain generation or demographic. It's becoming more challenging in general. And so many new platforms are coming out. Platforms like TikTok, where it's a whole new way to consume information. And the younger generations are learning this as they go too. So I think that that's a big opportunity. I think that there needs to be more media literacy, more courses starting at a young age. We can't just assume that because you're young, you know how to discern a different type of, content from another.
So in terms of the education you received as a journalist and then the marketing, I mean, is that being taught to somebody like you who's coming through the ranks now? Because if you go to an AOL now, you've got to really sort through a lot more misinformation than maybe you had to before. And how do you know what's misinformation?
Yeah, I mean, I hope that it is, but I'm not sure that it is, really, honestly. Again, I think it's become such a big problem, but I do think more people, there was so much information available to me to pull into this presentation today. So I do think it's being talked about a lot more. There are a lot more resources that are out there now than there were before. So I hope that is happening, but I'm not sure that they even know, that organizations even know how
Right.
to combat this.
Yeah. Well, and you had mentioned, I think that they're now teaching or incorporating some of that education at the college level or at the intern level. So that's helpful.
Yeah, and I think they're
To be
even
on the
starting
lookout.
in elementary and junior high. I think there's a lot more curriculum that's being developed, shared with educators to then bring into their classrooms. I came across a whole bunch of information that was free that said, if you're an educator, use this. This is really helpful. It was super helpful for me putting this together for you all. So I do think that it's starting to click, but I think we still have a ways to go.
Thank you.
Yeah.
It was wonderful. Your program was wonderful today. Does anyone else have questions this morning? Jessica, thank you so much. And again, this was recorded. It will be on our website. And if something comes to mind at a later time and you want to ask Jessica, you can send me an email and I can forward that to her and she can respond. So thank you
you.
everyone for being here today. Thank you, Jessica, for a wonderful program with great information.
You're so welcome. Thanks for having me.
Bye, everyone.